Welcome to the Empowerment Hour, a podcast dedicated to the woman ready to take charge of her life, live in her purpose, and be unapologetically authentic. I am your host, Nancy Ruffin, award-winning author, mommypreneur, and the self-proclaimed Latina Oprah who is dedicated to helping women unleash their power, discover their purpose, and live up to their fullest potential. My goal is to empower you, inspire you, and help you unlock your passions and discover your purpose so that you live the most fulfilled and impassioned life. If you're ready to make a change and start living on purpose, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hey guys, thank you for tuning in to another week of the Empowerment Hour podcast. It's your girl, Nancy Ruffin, aka the Latina Oprah, and I'm super excited. Here for another week of the podcast, another opportunity for us to connect, for me to share my insights, and hopefully share some gems with you guys. This week, I actually want to get into talking about maximizing our full potential. And really what I want to talk about is doing self-reflection, doing the difficult inner work, and why the world absolutely needs your gifts. But before we get into tonight's topic, I just want to recap what I've been up to lately, and just kind of catch you up on the things that have been happening in my life. So this past Saturday, I attended a women's empowerment event. And it was hosted by reality TV star Miss Jessica Castro. And this was her first women's empowerment event. She had it at this really swanky hotel in the financial district. I believe it was called A-Loft. And it had a really cute outside patio area. And the room was just filled with so many amazing women. And guys, if you haven't attended a women's empowerment event, I urge you to do so, especially if you're a woman who is an entrepreneur, if you're branding yourself, if you're a blogger, if you're any of these things, if you're in the entertainment industry, you definitely need to go to these events because it's how you're going to get your name out there. It's a really great way to network and to really meet women who are on the same journey as yourself. And this is why I attend women's empowerment events, because it allows me to not only connect with women who are on my same journey, but women who understand what it means to go full force to try to accomplish your dreams. And so while your inner circle may not understand why you're so busy, or why your inner circle may not understand why it is that you can't hang out or meet for dinner or meet for brunch, when you surround yourself with people or with women who are doing similar work, they get it. And for someone like myself, or for someone like yourself who is on that road, to success, when you see like your eyes on the prize and you're really trying to climb to the top, you want to surround yourself with like-minded individuals. Why? Because these are the women that are going to help to keep you focused. They're also great sources of connections, right? It's all about building your network, and possibly collaborating with them. And that's what I found for myself when I attended this event on Saturday. I left that event with some great connections. There were many women in attendance that I knew, but I also got an opportunity to meet women that I hadn't known before. And as a result of that, I already have a couple of women lined up that I'm going to be interviewing for this podcast. I'm also I'm in talks to collaborate with Suheidi Gonzalez. She's the owner of the Love Suheidi brand. And if you don't know her, I encourage you to get familiar. This Latina is a media powerhouse. She's worked for Latina Magazine as their love and sex expert. She had her own online video segment on Latina.com. She's also worked for SiriusXM as part of their on-air talent. She's written books. She's a blogger, so she's really well connected, and she's also really down to earth. And she's someone who I met, I don't know, a few years ago. I had her participate in one of my very first Fierce Women event panels, and it was catered to entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs. And I have brought her on to talk about what her journey has been as a writer slash blogger. Anyway, fast forward all these years later, we've maintained, connected, we've established a friendship, and now we're talking about possibly collaborating, so I'm super, super excited about that. But the point I'm trying to make is that these events are so important for the woman who is really looking to take her career or her brand to that next level, because you never know who you're going to meet. You never know who is going to be in a position to help you, and you never know who you can help in the process, right? Because it's always give and take. So yes, if you haven't attended one, I encourage you to seek one out and make sure that you get your butt in the door. There's nothing more exciting for me than to connect with women, like-minded women, and then really take over the world. And that is my goal. That is my plan. It's what I want for myself, and it's what I want for you guys. Okay, so with that said, tonight's topic is a bit more serious, and it's more aligned, not so much with business per se, but more aligned with ourselves and personal development and self-growth, and really tapping into who we are and why we are the way that we are. So as I mentioned when we started, some of the main themes I want to discuss on tonight's podcast revolves around the theme of self-reflection, doing that difficult inner work, and then once we do that, why those things are critical for us in sharing our God-given gifts and talents, right? And the reason that I say that inner work is important, because without understanding who we are, without understanding how we got to be the way that we are, we really are not going to be able to discover and act upon our God-given gifts and talents. So I know it might sound a bit arbitrary, but I really want to just talk about how we end up being who we are, how we look at ourselves, how we internalize certain things, and why our personalities are the way that they are. And, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because so often I see women, I see individuals, I've seen friends, even myself, repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again, right? And the reason that we repeat the same mistakes is because there's a part of us, something within us, that is accustomed to seeking out certain experiences. And usually those experiences are self-sabotaging experiences, right? Because we learn pretty much who we are, and our own self-concept and our self-esteem and all of those things are really developed as children, right? And so if we take the time to kind of think back to what our childhood was like, we can begin to see patterns, right? And the early stages of our lives is when we're beginning to develop trust, right? Trust in ourselves, trust in others. We're learning respect. We're learning how to view the world. We're also learning to see how the world views us. We're pretty much learning how to navigate in the world as independent human beings. So when we think about our childhood, And the things that we've seen as kids and the things that we've seen growing up, those things become internalized. Because what happens is when you're constantly put in certain situations in a certain environment, and actions and behaviors are repeated, then for the child, it teaches them, okay, well, this is how you act in this situation, right? Because we know that children really learn what they see. And so if they're constantly seeing chaos, if they are constantly being rejected, if they are in an unstable home, if they're being abandoned, all of these things, they learn to internalize, and then little by little, they begin to develop defense mechanisms against these things, right? And so what happens is as they get older, they begin to seek out experiences, situations, people who exhibit the things that they've been accustomed to, right? And so for me, for example, for a really long time, I always believed, or I guess I always gave the appearance that my family had their shit together. I grew up in Brooklyn in the 80s. It was a really poor neighborhood. We were surrounded by drugs, drug dealers, abandoned buildings. I mean, it was the stereotypical ghetto environment. That's how I grew up. And mostly all of my friends came from single parent families. Their fathers weren't around, their mothers were on welfare or struggling to make ends meet. And this was just the way of the times. It just was what it was back then. But in my household, I had both my mother and my father. My dad was a manager, of this retail men's shoe store. He earned, in comparison to everyone else in our neighborhood, he earned a really good living. My mother didn't have to work. He pretty much took care of us, and we were spoiled as far as material stuff, it is considered. But what was also happening within my household was that I was witnessing the development of gender roles and how women, in his eyes, were supposed to carry themselves or act. And it was strange because my father needed a woman that would cater to him, that would take care of him. He's from the old school. And so he really subscribed to the idea that the man went out, and worked and supported the household, and the wife stayed home and took care of the kids and took care of the husband. And, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Again, it was how it was back then. But what I started seeing, though, was that my mother had no sense of identity. And so for me, it was almost like she just existed as my father's wife and as our mother. She was never her own person or her own, she never had her own thoughts. She had to ask my father for permission for everything, to go out, for money if she needed to buy something. It's just what it was. And it was strange because growing up, my father did not want my sister or I to be that kind of woman, which is why he always stressed the importance of school. He always wanted us to get an education so that we would not have to depend on a man, and so that if the man didn't act right, we could just kick him to the curb. So it was an interesting dichotomy growing up, but these were all things that I internalized. And I think that as time went on, my mother started to feel like she wanted to be more independent. So as she is fighting for her independence, now it's going against everything that my dad believes. And so what originally united them was now almost putting a wedge between them, because my mother wanted to be independent, and my father wasn't having that. And so, for me, growing up, when I got into my own, well, because of that, let's say I never wanted to be in a relationship, so I never um, looked to have boyfriends or any of that. I just wanted to date. I never wanted to be settled down. I never wanted to give any man that much control over me, and it was because of what I had witnessed between my parents growing up. And so for my mother, as a woman, she had been taught to be docile, to be polite, to be accepting, loving, nurturing, make sure your man is taken care of, and all of these things at the expense of her own happiness. And so I didn't want that for myself, which was why I shied away from relationships for a really long time. And then when I met my husband and we got married, it was funny, but I fell right into the role of my mom. So everything that I had tried so hard to fight against, when I found myself in the same situation, I automatically just reverted into this woman who I had tried not to be for so long. And then it was almost like a constant struggle within myself, because a part of me was saying, okay, I'm this man's wife, so I have to take care of him. I have to be loving. I have to be supportive. I have to ask for permission. But then there was another part of me that was trying to fight against that, trying to fight for my independence, trying to fight for everything that I had worked so hard for. I was in school. I was an educated woman. I was working. I was making my own money, So in that respect, I wasn't like my mother, but it was this constant struggle within myself on how I could reconcile the two. And needless to say, it caused a lot of conflict in my marriage. And so for a really long time, my marriage was unhealthy. It was unstable. And, my husband and I, we just didn't know how to be married. And it resulted in a lot of separations and a lot of arguments. And then what I realized, though, that there were parts of me that I had to really work on, and because I started to realize this, I understood that there were certain parts of my life that had to change. And so what I mean by that is I had to be really conscious of the types of situations I would put myself in, and at that time, I got married when I was really young. I got married when I was 23. None of my friends at that point were even in serious relationships. So when I got married, they were all single, and it was hard for me to understand that now that I was married, things had to be a little different. Meaning that now I had someone else I had to think about. So I could not continue in my single life role, hanging out every weekend with my girlfriends, going to clubs, spending money frivolously, and and my husband too, for a long time, we both had the same mentality. And in my first book, Welcome to Heartbreak, I talk about the concept of married singles. So although we were married on paper, our actions and the way we were living was as if we were single, and it was to our own detriment. But then there came this turning point in my life, and it was around the year 2010, 2011, when I started to really think about my future and what I wanted that to look like. And I wanted to have children. And me and my husband, we had discussed it, and at that point, we had already seen a marriage counselor. We had went to couples retreat with the church. Like we had saw a therapist. We had done a lot of work on fixing our relationship, because we knew that it was broken, and we knew that there was things within ourselves, within our experiences, and within our past that we had to work on individually so that we could come together as healthy individuals and then have a healthy marriage. So I was still on that journey around 2011 when we started talking about having kids. And when we really tried, it wasn't as easy as we thought that it would be. But I came at this crossroads. And the thing is that when you're ready to do that self work, when you really tell yourself, universe, this is where I'm at, I need your help, I need you to guide me, the things pop up, the doors open, the people who you need to help you show up. And that was exactly what happened to me. And so in 2011, I committed to a year of self work. And what that meant was it was a long year of working on myself, of doing like that self reflection, of identifying the patterns and behaviors from my childhood that I have brought into adulthood, and how those behaviors were pretty much shaping my reality. And so all of those things that I had internalized as a child were not allowing me to move forward in my life. I wholeheartedly believe that they were blocking the energy that didn't, that was supposed to allow me to become a mother. It wasn't happening because all of those things within myself had not been healed. They had not been resolved. And so I started working with this woman who is a spiritual, I don't even know how to describe her, but all of her work centers on working with women and helping them connect back with their source, with their spirit. And so I started attending workshops led and facilitated by Gloria Rodriguez. This is a woman who I adore, and she has been so integral in my life and in the growth and in everything that I've been doing within the past 6-7 years. So I spent a year working with her, and so she helped me to really look at who I was. She helped me answer the difficult questions. Who are you? Who do you want to be? What behaviors do you have to let go in order to get to where you say you want to be? And although these questions really sound simple, it's a really hard journey, and it requires you to really look at yourself from the inside out and be honest with yourself. Because what happens is, as children, when things go wrong or when we see things occur that we may not understand, we tend to believe that there's something wrong with us, right? And children develop the idea that if they could only do it right, then their parents or their caregivers would love them, and they wouldn't get punished, right? So in the time or when those things are happening, the child believes there's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. And so as we grow older, we carry these false beliefs with us, and we start learning to reject ourselves. And when you reject yourself, you make yourself believe that you don't deserve anything good. So what happens is you purposely and intentionally just gravitate to the bad, to the negative, to the self-sabotaging things. And until you learn to identify those patterns and until you learn to identify why you're doing those things, you're going to continue to attract those types of experiences into your life. And so what you have to start doing is you have to start healing that inner child. You have to start healing the hurts of your past. For myself, I found that working with that inner child is probably the most valuable in helping to heal the things that hurt you, right? Because without healing, all you're doing is carrying those open wounds with you. And then you're bringing them into every situation, every relationship that you're in. So right now, at this point in your life, if you're not where you want to be, if you know that you're continuously attracting the same types of people, the same types of experiences. If you're unhappy, if you're not where you envisioned yourself to be at this point, then you really have to begin to do that self-work. And you have to be able to really look at yourself so that you can make yourself whole again. And so you have to start communicating with that inner child, and do that by whatever means you can afford to do it, right? So if you can afford to work with someone like I did with Gloria, then go ahead and do that. But if you can't, you can still do it on your own. You can still seek out information on the internet, in books. There's guides that help you uncover all of the trauma and help you to deal with it. I know for me, a really great tool that helps me tap into my spirit, into the core of who I am, is meditation. Meditation is difficult in the beginning when you're not used to it, but the more you do it, the easier it gets and the more powerful experience it becomes. And the meditation really allows you to see who you are, accept yourself as you are, forgive yourself, and even begin loving yourself again, right? Because that's what you really have to do. You have to get to a place where you're so in love with yourself that you will reject any person, any experience, any situation that is not aligned with the level or amount of love that you have for yourself. And so I say this because until we heal the hurts of the past, we will continue to repeat them in our lives going forward. And if you can't heal those parts of you, then you're never going to feel that you are worthy of love, of acceptance, of success, of anything great, right? And if you don't feel like you're worthy of those things, then you're not going to believe that you have gifts. You're not going to believe that you're talented. You're not going to believe that you have anything to offer the world, when in fact you do. The fact that you exist in the world is proof enough that you are enough. Okay? God, the universe, this greater source, created you for a purpose. And so it is your job, your responsibility to discover that purpose, to discover your gifts, to tap into those gifts, and then to share them with the world. But until you do that difficult self-work, until you look within yourself, until you learn to love yourself, you're never going to be able to offer the world all of the gifts that you've been equipped with. So I'm going to leave you guys with that. I know that this topic is a bit off topic from what I usually talk about, but I thought that it was really important to get the message out there, because I think so many of us struggle with these things and we don't know where to start. We don't know where to look. And it can be challenging, and it's also kind of leads us down the wrong path, and we end up staying stuck in the muck because we don't know how to get out of it. And so my hope is that at least with this podcast, you can begin to look at your own life and really just take a good look at yourself, do some of that self-reflection, and see where you can begin to chip away at those walls and those roadblocks that you have built since you were a child. So thank you guys for tuning in on another week. I would love to hear your feedback. You know where you can reach me. I'm on Instagram at I am Nancy Ruffin. Twitter is the same handle. Please visit my website, www.nancyarroyoruffin.com. unwillingness.com. Make sure you subscribe for my newsletter. I'm constantly sending exclusive content to my subscriber, and you guys are always the first to know about my events, and you get discounts. So until next time, mi gente, go out there, be brave, and crush some goals.